Welcome to a brand new episode of Movers and Shakers with your host, Simon Akers. Today we're joined by Damian Walters, CEO of BIFIS, the British Institute of Fitted Interiors Specialists. Damian leads the UK's only government-sanctioned, not-for-profit institute dedicated to raising standards across the fitted interiors industry, from installers to retailers, manufacturers, and consumers alike. In this episode, Simon and Damian dive into the challenges facing the industry, from the openness of skilled tradespeople entering customer homes, through the evolving role of apprenticeships and work experience, to how we attract and develop the next generation of talent. Simon and Damian share a common passion, advocating apprenticeships, education, and professional growth across the sector. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Installer Show, the UK's leading trade show for professionals across heat, water, air, energy, plumbing, HVAC, and building services. Installer Show brings together thousands of installers, manufacturers, and specifiers to explore innovation, connect with peers, and help shape the future of the built environment. So tune in.
Welcome to this very special edition of Movers and Shakers with myself, Simon Akers, and Damian Walters. Hello, Damian.
How are you?
Good, mate. Yeah, so thank you very much for coming up to the Simon Akers sofa today, all the way from Essex.
Yeah.
And the first thing to say, you had a great chat with the team here at Simon Akers this morning, which was a really interesting talk. And a revelation for me was that an installer can go into a home unchecked.
Yeah, there's no barriers to entry for tradespeople generally to go into consumers' homes. Yeah, KBB industry, sadly for forever has been kind of under-regulated, and that's a bit of a problem, I would say, especially in today's world that we live in.
I think the conversation to me was really much like it was mind-blowing, actually, that somebody that had perhaps a criminal record or perhaps hadn't been doing the right thing at the right time is in somebody's home unchecked with potential family members, children in the house. Yeah. And I think that's quite serious, actually, yeah.
I think it can be. You know, we've seen, I don't know if you remember, but way back in the day, I think Tesco's were selling kitchens, and they ended up on the front page because there was a sex offender in the home, essentially, and a consumer found out about that and obviously reported it to the newspapers, and that was front page news, but very damaging for the brand.
So I think we should come back to this really important point, actually, but I just thought we'd start with that because I think that's a great thing to convey out there, that there's definitely a need to review how that's actually happening and being played out in the current insulation market. Yeah. So the first thing, Damian, and I have to take my hat off to you, the Damian Walters brand is very big, and that's because you get out there, you talk to people, you make yourself known, and I know you feel very personal about this, that for the future that shouldn't be the case. So do you want to have a little chat about that?
No, I think that's a good point. So, the organisation was born off the back of one bloke. That was me. I say that. There were two other people involved in the organisation, but it was one bloke. I think it's fair to say that over, the last 20 years, as we approach our 20th anniversary, if you mention, Bixby, Damian would be one of the first things that you would say. And I think that's great because, of course, I have been responsible for building it, but the institute is so much more important, and I'm not going to be here forever, and none of us are. And I think the organisation, certainly over the last 5 years, has paid particular attention to not remove me necessarily, but just to show some depth to the organisation. There's lots of people, lots of great people involved in the organisation. It's important that they get a voice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to find out a little bit about the Damian inside today, if we can. So I've just shared with Damian that I do a karaoke every third Thursday of the month in our local pub. I love doing that.
You're dark horse, you.
Singing is very expressive, I don't like to talk about it too much, but I love a good song. Damian, so I understand that you've got some extra additional responsibilities in terms of the police. That's something you could perhaps just share with the camera. But I'd like to know about, how does Damian relax after work?
Well, do you know what? Probably better now than ever. I used to be probably accused, like many people, of constantly being on duty, as it were. I think, when you've got your your own business to a point. It's a lot, it's very important to you, isn't it? And therefore you're never off duty. But as I've got older, I've learned to kind of switch off. So I've got a family, so I've got 2 boys who are 18. One's just about to join the police, and the other boy's been in the RAF now for a year, who I'm incredibly proud of. Of course, I've got a daughter who's 14, who's just going through sort of her options at school and is thinking about GCSEs and all that lovely stuff. So there's plenty to keep me occupied.
So you've got 3 children?
I've got 3 kids, married to Claire, and Claire's also part of the organisation, has been with me since the beginning. So long-suffering wife, some may say.
So she's your support?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because that's just it. In every business situation, a good leader has to also have a mentor. So is that mentor Claire, or do you lean on somebody else?
I've surrounded. I try not to bring work home. I think especially when you work with somebody, you will know yourself. But when you work with your partner, I think it's really important that there's a separation. Because the relationship and and your home life is so important for your mental health.
You have to have a cut-off.
You have to, you have to. And, certainly from my perspective, I do try to separate it, as does Claire. But yeah, I probably lent on various different people over the years. I've got a good team. Started to build a good team at Bigby now, probably over the last 4 or 5 years in particular. And I do feel like now that there's a management team in place that can kind of not just share the burden, but we can bounce off ideas. We're a very effective little team, I would say now.
And that leads me on to a really great question. So you're a great advocate for learning and development apprenticeships, but how do you, Damien and the team, how do you invest in your people at Bigby currently? What are you doing there to bring them on and to make them feel motivated and to self-develop themselves,
It's a really good question. Certainly from my perspective, there's a couple of things that you can do to ensure that your people are looked after. The environment for which they work in, the equipment that they have access to, that's always really important to me. We moved into a lovely new airy workspace last year, which was very much focused on team and focused on the environment for which they work in. Sadly, as an institute, the one thing that we don't have as a not-for-profit institute is that we don't have a checkbook that we can throw at people. When I used to work in the corporate world, to reward people, you increase salaries and you did lots of
bonuses and so on.
We haven't got that. We haven't got that ability. So we have to look at the environment. But I think the most important for me is bringing them on the journey, just making sure that people really understand why you do what you do. And more importantly than that, I guess, understanding that the role that they play within that. My team are so important, and I know everybody says that, and and to a point that would be right, but as an institute, we don't have anything shiny that we send out to people. We don't have a product that people unwrap and go, okay, Bigby's great because this is great. So actually our people are so important because they are that product.
So I guess what you're saying really is you have to communicate with your staff but bring them on a journey.
Totally.
So do you have like a regular morning meeting, or is it an afternoon meeting, or how do you do that, Damien?
So it's probably not as structured as that. So from a management perspective, we have regular meetings. So we're continuously talking around key points that are important to us, reviewing where we are against that, celebrating the wins, focusing on the areas of challenge and working through it, with collaboration in mind. That's something that we do. But I think in terms of, I have a very open door policy. And again, I know it's a bit cliche, but the decision making, the thought process into decision making is not something that I isolate to myself. But quite often, if I'm looking to do stuff, I'll just wander out onto the floor and have conversations with people. And I think that's really important. And I don't do that to tick a box.
No.
I do that because their contribution to that conversation helps me make those decisions.
Brilliant.
Installer show, very much in the embryonic stages for KBB, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom industry. I think it's a lot closer than it was last year, and I think next year it'll be closer again to what we want as an industry. My view is that we need to kind of invest in that now. If we want a show for installation and installers, then we need to be part of its success and its growth, and that's why we're involved.
So it's all changed for you. So from October, there's a big name change.
Yeah, there is. So we go from the British Institute of KBB Installation to the British Institute of Fitted Interior Specialists, and we do so for a number of reasons. One, we want to get closer to consumers, and fitted interiors is a lot more consumer friendly and understood by consumers. We're also working on a number of government initiatives, from our apprenticeship, which is an apprenticeships in fitted interiors, right the way through to some of that core sector work that we're doing for competencies. And we're working within the fitted interiors part of that. So fitted interiors makes a lot more sense. It does probably open up a little bit more scope to work with a wider group of people and not just kettle to KBB. But KBB and installation sits very much at the heart of everything we do. But, you know, as I was talking to you earlier, our kitchens, our bedrooms and bathrooms are far more, I guess, progressive, more functional spaces now than they ever have been. And therefore the crossover in terms of people that work in those spaces has become broader. Okay. So it makes sense for us to continue evolving to meet and match that.
Smashing. So the other objective, I guess, a lot of people that we would talk to say, you know, Simon, we really wish we could professionalise the industry in terms of either whether that be like a qualification for a designer or a qualification for an installer. And also thinking about retailers, their own companies, how can they stand out, how can they do the right thing, how can they make sure that the quality of the install is good. So just tell us a bit more about AIM.
So AIM is an initiative that we introduced the back end of last year. Since our beginnings in 2006 as an organisation, we focused on the installer on the front line. You know, it made sense to do that. And therefore our offering has been really focused on the installer, making sure that they're the right person to go in, they have the right credentials, competencies, and they're compliant, essentially to go and fit in the home, whether that's, you know, in domestic refurbishment market or construction. So we focused our efforts purely on that. As we've evolved, we understand that there's a need for us to support the industry in a slightly different way, and that is working specifically with retailers and even sort of main contractors, and that's more about their method of delivering an installation service, whether that's you know, an internally employed workforce or whether it's a subcontracted workforce. We've produced based on our insight, based on our standing and our positioning as an organisation, we've formulated an accreditation process that helps to do two things. One, it helps to reduce risk. So in the things that we look at within our accreditation, it's about reducing risk to all key stakeholders that operate within that business, in and around that business, whether you're an installer, the retailer, the designer, whoever it is. These methods are about reducing risk to all of those people.
And I think it was really good to actually meet your endpoint assessor, independent assessor at the installer show. I think he was saying, you know, to the group that were watching, that he's not there to catch anybody out. He's there to assist and to develop. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that one of the criteria hasn't been met. There's an adjustment that can be made.
Our role is to support businesses to reduce risk and to set standards that we can all be proud of. I think a lot of businesses, you know, we operate in silos. We've been doing things for a long time, therefore we continue to do that if it's been successful in our own minds. However, we do live in a very fast-moving world, don't we, Simon? And legislation, consumer expectations, the law, all of this is forever moving. And as a result of that, I think it's important to get, you know, occasional sort of dip check on that to make sure it's still where it needs to be. But also support from an organisation like us that does have, you know, unrivaled view on industry, allowing us to give support into making that proposition stronger. Because if we can be stronger, it's better for everyone.
100%, it's a better future. So that's when we've got an existing installation team that's being accredited, let's just say for now. But what about bringing new blood into the industry? So I'm a big advocate of actually boots on the ground and having a conversation with an installer or a retail you know, SME business, that this is how you hire and this is how you put people on government standards. I really believe, Damian, that if you send someone a link, you send a link and you ask them to click that link and do the process, it just doesn't work. So have you got any good suggestions that potentially people could think about banging the drum for that would help with more real-time, face-to-face conversations around this subject?
Listen, I think you've got to be in it to win it. There's a responsibility for the industry to open its doors and be probably more transparent in terms of how it communicates with those people that it wants to invite in. Equally for them, there is no shortage of people interested in our industry. It's definitely our responsibility to create that conversation point, and whether we do that by knocking on doors and having sensible conversations, whether we're getting involved and looking at all the content that's kind of available out there, including content like this. I think it's our own responsibilities to do that. But opening up the conversation and talking to people about the challenges they face and the opportunities that exist is absolutely key.
On the back of that, I'm a great believer that more companies should promote success stories. So if there is a real life situation where an apprentice has been taken on, they've passed a distinction level or what have you, I think that more companies could share those wins for the industry for the future.
I agree.
Have you got any advice to people on maybe how they could do that, and maybe if you've got any plans for the future for yourself?
Listen, I think that's a really good point. I think we do, as humans, tend to focus on the negatives, and we can be really quite sceptical sometimes, especially when new things are mooted or proposed. So I think bringing out the real life successes, for which there are many, I think is important. Whether that's just talking to your existing team or your stakeholders about that, whether that's using social media, which I think is really important. Let's talk to some real life people rather than talking about what good looks like. I think they're really important. Linking in with obviously yourself is really a vehicle for that. I know you're incredibly thankful for good content around this particular subject, and we are too.
I mean, quite frankly, we won't have a business if we don't have new people coming into the recruitment market.
We won't have an industry.
Exactly. There's no point in moving someone from A to B back from B to A again. There's no point.
No.
So we have to make it attractive for more people to either stay, which could be upskilling existing employees in the industry, but for new people to come through. So education for me is a big thing. So it starts with the parents. And it starts with their mentality about, or their understanding about what the options are. But the big thing that I would like to ask you, Damian, is about work experience. So work experience often gets forgotten, but at the point of the careers advisor at school saying these are your options, should the industry maybe more embrace work experience?
Do you know, that's a really good point. It may even have been a conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago, but I remember when we did have that, I had this whole revelation thinking, you know what, Simon, you might actually be onto something now. So credit where credit's due, because yes, I think apprenticeships is something that people should embrace, but yes, that's not straightforward.
It's a stepping stone, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we need to. The first thing that we need to do is open our doors to new people. As an industry, we need to open our doors. Create the window in, and I think work experience is a fantastic way of doing that if it's structured.
I mean, we had a conversation in Installer Show with a young lad that came in from Anglia Interior. That's known. Harvey came to talk to you. And I think we had that conversation with Harvey. So that if you're not sure, nobody knows at 18 what they want to do.
No.
So I think the advice, Damon, that you gave was go out and spend a week with a fitter.
Definitely, yeah.
Side saddle,
definitely,
and see how you feel.
Yeah, and I think we as an industry need to be more open to that. And we as an organisation, I'm sure if we work in collaboration on that, we can make that process easier and less complicated. Because there are a lot of things that people need to consider, when taking on. I know schools, we've taken on some work experience people within our own environment.
Yeah, good.
And it's not straightforward. It's definitely not as complicated as taking on an apprentice, something else that we've done. But nevertheless, there's still things to think about. But work experience, I think, is a really good idea. It's quite.
We did some conversations in Installer Show around the sort of barriers to hire. And I did a little talk, and I must admit, the guy that was sat there, he was very, very negative. One of these people that go around the show and they want to be devil's advocate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So he was obviously quite an angry man. But this particular chap mentioned no names, and he was like, what's the point of me taking on an apprentice because they're going to leave? What would you say to people who? So I hear that quite a lot, Damien.
Yes, and that is a very familiar story. But we as business leaders, business owners, whether that's a micro SME or a huge corporate, if we did that, if we had that mentality about bringing people on and then worrying about whether they would be with us in the future, I think we wouldn't progress. You'd never hire anyone, and we wouldn't actually move forward. My view is really quite simple, and I think we had the conversation actually in the Big Studio installer show, was that I think we need to produce a pathway for people joining our business. We can't think about how, what's the minimum we could pay people, what's the least we can get away with, and then hope that they stay with us in 3 to 4 to 5 years. We've actually got to show people that there's a future working, because not everybody wants to be self-employed. Not everybody wants to lead their own little empire. They don't. Some people quite happily work for somebody else, assuming that somebody else puts on a really good pathway for them. So I think one of the frustrating things that I get, Simon, I don't know if you get it, I'll be surprised if you don't, but a conversation that I've had on more than one occasion is that when we talk about apprenticeships, even for the potential employer who is really quite pro apprenticeships, one of the first questions they will say is, what's the minimum wage for an apprentice? And I pull my hair out.
Frustrating question. I
pull my hair out because the next question is, well, I'm a bit worried that they're going to leave me. Well, it shouldn't be about that. Okay, that might be the starting point, but you need to give somebody this pathway through in recognition that people have aspirations,
and of course,
financially and otherwise.
And of course, you could say in reply to that question is that you could take on any member of staff, no matter whether it's apprentice or not, and if you don't invest in that individual and train them and collaborate on an equal level, they're going to leave anyway.
They'll leave anyway, yeah, so absolutely.
It almost becomes irrelevant.
It's exactly the same. We take on members of staff in our business, and one thing that we can't do, as I've said to you before, is because we're the type of organisation we are, we're a not-for-profit institute. We can't throw money at people. Far from it. Everybody involved in the business are worth double than what they're paid at the moment, without a doubt. And I know that, they know that.
Yeah.
So what you've got to do is that you've got to do other things, and you can't just throw somebody a screwdriver and a minimum wage and hope that they're going to be there in 3 years' time, because they probably won't. However, build a future for them, give them a pathway where in maybe 3 years' time as an installer, you might invest in new tools for them, you might give them a van and they would become team 2 and have their own responsibilities.
They may take on their own apprentices. All that.
It's not difficult, some of this stuff.
So on the back of that, and there's who's going to invest in the future of the industry. So do you think, not just solely down to manufacturers, but could manufacturers do more, Damien?
I think we could all do more, but Andy Davies at KBB Review said some really good stuff recently, earlier this year or later last year, and he said probably we've got to stop looking at this as being an industry-wide problem. If we focus on our own little empires and making that better, then if everybody did that, by virtue, we'd be in a better place as an industry. So maybe that's the key. But I think we all probably need to think about it differently. Manufacturers, I think the manufacturers probably do need to do more, in recognition that whilst they might not have a direct relationship with installers or installations, they do rely, indirectly or otherwise, on having a compliant, competent workforce to fit that product in years to come. And as we sit here today, I don't know where that workforce is necessarily coming from. It's not sitting there waiting. Well, it probably is, but we've got to do something about it.
And I heard this very startling statistic from a national retailer of kitchens and bathrooms at the show, which astounded me. I heard the rumour, there's only a rumour, that said that in 10 years, up to 50% of installers could have retired. That is shocking.
Well, that came out at our annual conference.
Right.
It was actually commented on at the show. But it was Connie Collette from Wix basically said, and I think it was a lot sooner than 10 years. I think it was the next 5 years.
Good grief.
60% of the workforce would not be there.
Right.
That's a problem, and that is a business that spends a lot of time and effort on putting together a really good installation proposition.
I think we need to go back to this work experience conversation, because we need to break the cycle of nothing happening. Because I think I think you would agree, Damien, most of the nationals do it really well, actually, apprenticeships, the ones that get involved in it.
Yeah. It's because they're levy payers, to be fair.
They're levy payers, and they've got the funding, they can get the manager to to organise the training with the providers, etc. But when you come down to the smaller SMEs, it's more difficult to find. People say, Simon, I just haven't got the time, I don't know where to look for an apprenticeship, then how do I find somebody, and what are the standards, and how much it's going to cost? There's so many unanswered questions. So I guess to me, it's like if we were to paint this picture of an ideal world, how could we make this so much simpler? And take your point earlier about people working inside. How can we break those silos down and have one really great point of reference?
It's a difficult question. It is, and I don't know if there is an answer to that.
There's always too many places to find out, and then that creates a confusion. I
think potentially, but I think the most important thing is that we need to recognise and just be comfortable. And they talk about the army, and just slightly digressing here. But the army talk about the art of being comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And if you can do that, you create a really great soldier. And they do that a lot in their initial training. I remember having this conversation with one of the sergeants when my lad went into the RAF recently. And they said in their presentation, what we're going to do in this first 10 weeks is going to be a short, sharp shock to the system for your little Johnnies and your little Sallys. And part of that is about making these youngsters feel comfortable in uncomfortable situations. I think for us, we need to feel the same. So yes, apprenticeships aren't straightforward. They are going to take some investment. That's going to be investment in time, in money, and in effort. There's no solution that takes away all of that problem. We just need to be comfortable that actually there is a real reason why we're doing it, and a benefit to all of us if we do. And then we need to work through the rest of it. But in your point, there is a lot of places to find information. That shouldn't be an Achilles heel. We should be able to go to these places, but probably collaboration would be better in terms of having a unified message around things like apprenticeships.
We regularly have these conversations.
Yes,
I have to say that most people that I talk with, and I don't know everything, I'm learning every single day, are absolutely clueless on how they want to do it. They just really want to do it, but they don't know how. So is that something you offer people?
It is, absolutely. I say we royally. A lot of what we do is around strategic partnership. So we have a strategic partnership with the apprenticeship partner, and Hannah Hockley, which is a name that people may or may not be familiar with. But Hannah is a wealth of
amazing
experience.
Lady. She's an amazing lady.
She just knows her stuff, and it's brilliant because it's a resource that we find incredibly useful. But more importantly, the people that we signpost into her.
Gotcha. That's what you're doing.
Absolutely, And there's more than one solution there. So for us, we have some self-help advice and guidance that can be accessed via our website. So if you are the sort of person that just wants to download a PDF and read it when at your own leisure, then crack on. We've got a library of information for you there. But if you want more, then absolutely we'll point you into the apprenticeship partner, and that is anything from a little bit more information to a full handheld solution for apprenticeships.
That's real good direct advice. So let's finish the last couple of questions. So we always ask this question. So Damien, can you look into the camera and tell the camera a really amusing story from your career that we could all learn from?
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's a question. An amusing...
What happened that made you smile?
Well, there's lots that makes me smile.
We've got some shared experiences, of course. But
we have got some shared experiences, with live broadcasts.
Yes, of course, we like a bit of live broadcast.
Oh my goodness!
Well, apart from that one,
we won't cover that, Simon. It's all bound to history. I don't know. There's lots that makes me smile. I'll give you an example from last week. So one thing that we're doing at the moment, actually week before last. So one thing we're doing at the moment, we're we're working in we're doing a schools program, so we're spending some time going out to local schools, working in partnership with Charlton Athletic Football Club, or actually it's their community trust, and we're also working with the University of Greenwich, and we're going out and we're going into schools and we're just talking to kids about the opportunities that exist within the KBB industry, when I go in there, I'm faced, it's almost like a textbook scenario. I'm faced with a load of really uninterested kids who are not really that interested in talking to some CEO from some industry that they've never heard of or show any interest in whatsoever. However, by the end of the session, people are sat up bolt right and listening and are very interested in what we've got to say. And that's because we've got a bloody good industry, and it always sort of amuses me, the transition from this sort of nonchalant, not interested
to begin with,
and that's our fault, Listen, let's be honest with rock and roll, right? It is, don't get me wrong, it's done us all very well over the years, but it's far from rock and roll. It's not the most interesting of subjects, especially if you're 15 or 16, and your only interaction with the kitchen is when you're sort of bowling there to get your food out of the fridge, take it up to your room to consume it. And I've got teenagers to just kind of prove that with. But it's so great to see them turn around, and I always get a little bit of a kick in turning them around. Some of the questions that you get from at the end are just amazing. I can imagine, So I mean it's not particularly
keep it real, keep it fun.
Do you know what? There's a lot this industry can give. There is. It might not be rock and roll, but it's an industry that puts the food on the table of tens of thousands of families.
That's a great link. So we started with you personally. We're going to finish with you personally. So Italian, Indian, Chinese, or pub grub for Damien?
Oh, I think that's changed over the years. I quite like a bit of pub grub these days.
You're a pub grub boy,
and do you know what it is? It's actually more about the environment than the food. I think as I get older, I'm quite enjoying pubs. Yeah, perfect. I don't know if that's I'm by no means addicted to alcohol, but I don't mind a pint on a Friday afternoon now.
Support your local pub.
Yeah. Listen,
you have to do it, don't you? We had that conversation, community.
I think it's great. The conversations that you can have in pubs, are really, really good. Don't get me wrong, I do like curry though.
Right, Damian Walters, thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for the opportunity, mate.
Thank you.